Good afternoon, everyone, calling in from sunny Miami, and welcome to Inform and Engage. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the business of journalism and why this might be the right time to invest in local news. I'm your host today, Paul Cheung, Director of Journalism and Technology Innovation at the Knight Foundation. And joining me is the co-founder and CEO of Axios, Jim VandeHei.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
Good. And Jim, where are you calling from?
I am in lovely Clarendon, which is in Arlington, Virginia. I can see the U.S. Capitol outside our window here. I'm actually back in the office, which I love.
Oh, wow. And so for those who doesn't know, Jim actually, before he's the CEO of Axios, he has a long career covering politics from Inside Washington Publishers to Roll Call to a brief stint at the Wall Street Journal before founding Politico in 2006. And I'm sure a lot of people ask you questions about Politico, but for today's conversation, we're going to focus on Axios. But one thing I want to ask you is, what is the one thing you learned that shaped how you run Axios? And what is one thing that you would never do again from your political days in Axios?
Oh my God, it's hard to narrow it to one. Remember when first off, thanks for doing this. Thanks for having me. Remember when we started Politico, I had gone from being a political reporter who was kind of a lone wolf, just doing campaigns, covering the White House, covering Congress, to suddenly co-founding a company and having to run it. So the thing I learned is that almost every instinct I had was wrong. I thought you could just kind of work people to death and work really hard and that will magically start a company. And so what I guess the big thing I learned was the importance of culture, of like really understanding what type of people you want to surround yourself with, how to give them real clarity of focus about the mission, and how if you get the right group of people, like, we refer to them as 10 or 50 Xers, like people who are just so much better than most people you meet at what they do. If you can put them in one place and they're good people and you have a clear mission, you can do almost anything. I think it's why Axios has had a lot of success early on. The one thing I would never do again, and it's a lesson I learned the hard way many times over, I'll never again for the rest of my life tolerate somebody working with me who might be a genius in an area, but is not a good person. I think it's very tempting sometimes to overlook the flaws or kind of the meanness or the edge to some people because they're brilliant in a different topic. In our company, I make it clear, like if that happens, you're out and there's really no redemption. You have to be fundamentally a good person who cares about your colleagues and cares about what we're trying to do at Axios more than you care about your own selfish ambitions.
Now, when you left Politico in 2016 and launched Axios in 2017, did you ever thought of making Axios a nonprofit? Was that ever an option for you?
Never, not once.
Why not?
Well, I have nothing against not-for-profits. I help out with a lot of different not-for-profits. I just think that there's something about capitalism. There's something about a for-profit business that just brings out, I think, the edge in people. It creates almost like I just feel like there tends to be a little bit more velocity to it, often a little bit more sort of ambition to grow it when it's in a for-profit setting. And I wanted to build a business that is profitable. Like I want to run a profitable business. I want to do really important things, which is what motivates me. But if I do it really well, I want to benefit from it. And not only me, I want everyone who works with us to benefit from it. Every person who works at Axios has and will forever be a shareholder. I think if you come here and do big things, you should share in the success of the company. And so I like that for-profit dimension, and that there's a lot of great not-for-profits out there. You guys doing like great work. I think we just have sort of a different approach and a different passion.
And so, right now, Axios is a Series C company. You have raised $57 million so far, between 2016 and 2019.
Yeah.
And during that time, the media landscape had really changed a lot, right? So that's a little bit after those big investment round of BuzzFeed and Mike.com. How do you pitch to your investors, right, for Axios? How do you get them on board to fund news?
A good question. Because I think it's changing a little bit, but there certainly was a period of time where media was seen as a dog investment. They're like, oh, all these other companies that had all this promise never fulfilled that promise. To be honest, it wasn't hard for us to raise money, largely because we could say, listen, we did Politico. We founded it, we created it, we grew it to what now I think is about 140 million plus revenue company that is making a lot of money, has diversified its revenue streams, and is sitting in Europe. So by the time we do Axios, we're like, listen, like there aren't that many people who've had success in media. And here we have a very compelling theory of the case about how really smart people are going to consume content over the next decade. And we have a very compelling business case of how you make money off of that. And so to be honest, it wasn't hard to raise money. And in this environment, it's really easy to raise money. Raising money is not a problem. There's never been more capital out there from different sources for almost any good idea. So it's much more about how do you responsibly raise capital and invest it to build something that is truly durable and scalable. And that's what we obsess about. Like, this is my life's work. Like, I am a journalist at heart. If for some reason I was no longer the CEO or the founder of Axios, I would do something else in journalism. I believe that information that is truthful and high quality is maybe the most precious asset on earth other than human life. And so I want to be part of that. I want to be thinking about how do we protect that? How do we grow that? How do we get it to more people? How do we restore trust if people don't have faith in journalism? And those are big, hard, difficult questions, but to me, they're fun. And I think if you in life can align something you would do for free with something you can actually get paid to do, that's the holy grail. That's nirvana. And I think I've been able to do that. I love this space.
But how did you sort of convince is your investor investing in you, maybe they believe in, democracy, the health of the democracy, but
right.
What is it about your plan that make them think, yes, this can be profitable when so many other sort of like traditional news company are struggling to be profitable?
Right. To be clear, I love my investors. I don't think any of them are investing because they care about the health of democracy. I mean, their job is to invest and make money. So the only way they would put money into us is if they looked at us and said, we think we can make 5 or 10x return. Mm-hmm. I don't begrudge them for that. That's what they do. That's the line of business they're in, and I'm thankful that they support us. I think the reason that they did is they said, listen, if you can get smart professionals to consume content on a daily basis, we know how to make money off of that. We know how to sell high-end ads against that. We know how to produce really good events and convene really important people. We know how to build B2B businesses. We know how to help people communicate better. And so we have several different businesses that sit under Axios. But from the investor standpoint, they look at it and they're like, yeah, like, look what they're doing. Like we had 40% growth during the coronavirus. We'll have 40% growth again this year. And I don't say that to pound my chest. I just say it if an investor's looking at it, they want to see results, and they want to then see, oh, not only have you done it once, you've done it twice, and there's not that many people in this space that have. So I think it gives investors a lot of reinsurance. But there's no doubt that I do think this is changing. I think media is now suddenly becoming a more attractive investment, mainly because a lot of the companies that I never thought were that good to begin with have gone away or they're shrinking. Like basically the people who are just kind of producing content at mass for with no real mission to it other than just to have content and drive programmatic advertising, that stuff's all dead or it's going to die. It's not much interest to me. Like what interests me is really high quality content that people are willing to either pay for or advertisers are willing to pay a premium to be in front of that audience in a safe, well-lit space. And so you're now seeing, I think, a lot more interest in the media space because I think media has gotten better at it. You look around, look at how much better the New York Times is today than 4 years ago at driving subscriptions. Well, then you have a company like The Athletic who just does sports, maybe copy a couple of things that the New York Times does, hires high quality sports reporters, and they have 1 million subs or whatever they have now. Real successful company. That's a great template. You see something like The Information that says, okay, Politico was successful. Can I create a Politico for the technology world? And they have, and they put up a consumer paywall. And best I can tell, Jessica Lesson has a wonderful business. And so people are realizing how to do this. I think the entrepreneurs who are getting into it are smarter. And what I love to see is that I do think one of the comparative advantages that we've had in the success of this company is a bunch of people, but in terms of like me and Mike specifically, we're journalists. And so I think we understand the journalism piece. We don't just look at it as a business, though it is a business. And when you see that happening, you see a lot of entrepreneurial journalists, whether they're moving to Substack or, Jessica Lessin was an editor, was a reporter. Now she's a founder. You saw this with Kara Swisher. She's now an entrepreneur. Ben Smith is back at the New York Times, but I would be shocked if Ben Smith doesn't go off and start a company in the next couple of years, because I know Ben, he's a very entrepreneurial, smart guy. And so you're seeing that blend of entrepreneurial fire in the belly with journalistic passion. When you get those two things together, I just think you have a better chance of creating something that's real, and you'll hear these words from me a lot, durable and scalable. Like stuff that just rides a trend doesn't interest me. It's going to burn away. You want stuff that's real and tethered to stuff that's happening today.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. So I will circle back with you about Athletic and Substack. But in terms of journalists being entrepreneurs,
yep.
Do you think journalists could be really good? You and Kara Swisher, do you think you guys are the exception, or you guys are sort of the norm?
We're definitely
journalists good entrepreneurs.
Definitely the exception, but there's just more exceptions than there were before. Remember when we did Politico initially back in 2006, 2007, people thought we were on drugs. They're like, what the hell are you talking about? You have one of the coolest jobs at the Washington Post, and you're going to go start some little publication? So back then it was exotic. Whereas now you look at Ben made the leap and helped create BuzzFeed. Kara helped create Recode. Jessica Lessin created the information. Lots of that happening. I don't want to leave you with the impression that I think most journalists are good entrepreneurs. Actually, I think most journalists are terrible entrepreneurs, and I think most journalists don't understand business at all. I think they understand journalism, and that's fine. But you are seeing at least more people who have both, and when it flows from both, I just think you have a better chance of having success.
So how do you get to understand business? Is that something that just find a Politico and you learn along the way, or you think is more instinctual?
It's hard to unpack, because when I go back and I think of Jim 2006 covering the presidency, I wasn't sitting there dreaming up new business ideas, and I wasn't reading business books. And so it was only once we started Politico and I loved it even more than I loved journalism, then I'm like, oh, okay, like there's something inside of me that is entrepreneurial. I definitely have always felt like I probably have a higher tolerance for risk than most people. And I think I have, hopefully in a healthy way, more self-confidence than most people. So I could do it. And then I was like, I'm not lying. It's not false humility when I say I was terrible at it. I was not a good business leader early on. And what I did was I think I had the humility, hopefully, to recognize that. But then I went out and did what a reporter would do. I went out and really studied what are good companies doing? What is a good culture? I started to read some of those business books. I'd pick up the phone and I would call people. And then I would just watch. I'd watch what people respond to and what they don't respond to. And then that's kind of the cool part of this job, is that I'm constantly learning, right? You're learning about, I never would have thought about raising money and how do you figure out your dilution and stuff. Like it's all kind of the same thing that stimulated me as a reporter. Like, oh, I'm learning something new and I'm taking a critical eye to it. And hopefully with time, I'm accruing more knowledge and I'm applying that knowledge in a humble way, knowing that like there's a lot that I don't know. And so it is mainly like self-taught, and then being around really, really smart people. Like one of our co-founders, Roy Schwartz, who wasn't in the media space, because midway through Politico, I realized the key to starting and running a really good media company is never hire anyone from the media other than reporters, because there's just more talent in other spaces. And he came from Gallup, and he opened my eyes to like a whole new world of how you can run a company. And you just hire people who are super talented, and you get them fired up about the mission, and you unleash them. And it doesn't matter if they had been selling ads before or if they even cared about media. Like that was such a difference maker. And to this day, that's pretty much our mentality.
And in terms of, Axios sort of main manifesto, smart brevity, Axios get you smarter, faster, and what matters. Was that the original concept that you sold your investor on, or was that sort of like an evolution?
I mean, obviously it's evolved now, but the fundamental problem that we were trying to solve has not changed. We basically, the observation we had that turned out to be correct was that people's minds were clogged. They're getting so much information from so many spaces that they're almost paralyzed. And the way that you could liberate the human mind, especially for the smart professional, is you have to help them get smarter faster across more topics. It's not good enough for me just to know a lot about politics. I need to understand technology, business, China, automation, like all these different topics. So you had to figure out a way to make that process way more efficient. And that's what smart brevity is. It's both the smarts. We're going to hire the smartest people to help navigate these complex areas for you. But the brevity part might be even more important, which is we are going to look at the science, the data, the design to give you the most efficient, hopefully pleasing, edifying reader or viewer or listener experience humanly possible. And it was the marriage of those two. And investors, I think, saw what we saw. They felt what we felt, and so they thought, okay, these guys will probably be successful. And so we spent a couple months raising money, but that selling people on the thesis was not hard. When the truth is, all you're trying to do when you're raising that first round of money is you're trying to jack up a valuation as high as you possibly can on something that doesn't exist, so you can get as much money as low a dilution as possible. That's the game. So you're trying to say this idea, this thing on paper, it's worth $33 million. I think that's what we ended up getting valued post money on our first raise. Well, how did you? There's no algorithm that spits that out. There's no science behind it. It's a horse trade, and it's like people applying a different logic from different angles to come up with a price, and it's worked out. We've had great investors, and we've been able to have a lot of success as a company ever since.
And how do you operationalize that sort of concept, right, around smart brevity? Like, how do you choose whether it is sort of a newsletter product or a mobile product? Like how do you choose sort of your product distribution channel fit?
Well, one, you try to figure out, like, one of the temptations when you're starting a company is to try to do a lot of things. And it's very hard to do a lot of things well. And so we said, listen, we're going to do one thing and we're going to do it exceptionally well. We know that almost every smart person is consuming most of their information on this. And so I have like the drawings, and I spent hours for a year and a half, and almost to this day, I never do. I've never looked at a computer. I'm on a computer right now. This will be the first time in weeks. I spent all of my time for 2 years just staring at the screen, trying to figure out how can I make this the greatest utility possible, down to like studying, like, how can we get rid of any distraction? How can we utilize the pixels? How can we make sure the background makes it as pleasing in terms of the science and how it interacts with your eyes? And so we said, let's master text, and mobile and newsletters just tend to look identical. And so almost all of our emphasis in the early days is we're going to try to be essential to the most powerful people in media, business, and politics. And we're going to do that through a newsletter. We're going to do it through the app, or do it through the website at the time. But it's going to be screen by screen, and it's going to be based on an iPhone or an Android. And that focus allowed us to do that. We hired designers. It becomes clarifying, right? When you say our design principle is, I want simplicity. There's nothing, how we organize the company, how we design things, elegance and simplicity. Anytime someone brings something to me, I'm like, make it more simple, then bring it back to me. Well, that's clarifying for a designer, because most designers are like artists. Artists want to draw. When you say, no, I want you to like draw less, it creates this filter. And so that filter got us designers that believed in our theories, got us reporters that believed in our theories, got us business leaders who believed in our theories. And so we have this culture of people who, they really buy into smart brevity. They really buy into the mission, and they're fun. They're smart. Like, you're from the right gene pool, and you just happen to be smarter than the average cat at something. Like, I want you working for us. But they also have to be really good people, collaborative people. This is the happiest company I'll ever work at. The only friction is sort of in the ambition, the ideas, very little personal friction, no backbiting. It's just And that just makes it easier to recruit and retain talent. And to be honest, like I'm 50, like I don't want to work around people that are a drag. I want to work on really exciting ideas with people who make me feel better about life. If you're sucking the life out of me, I don't want to be around you.
What? Journalist being a drag? Never.
But even our newsroom, Paul, I'm telling you, you know, some of our folks, like our newsroom is actually happy. Like we're laughing because like journalists in general are malcontents. But even our newsroom's happy. Like people are nice. They bring treats for each other. Like there's just like that stuff is contagious. And that goes to your first, like it's one of the things I learned pretty quickly when in the early days at Politico is that it just like all habits trickle down quick, right? So like if I'm at the time, like the critique, the very fair critique of me early on would be, oh, Jim's a smart, ambitious guy, but he works 20 hours a day and he's maniacal and he expects everyone else to be nuts. And that is a fair critique and is a terrible leadership model. But what I learned was, okay, but what are the good parts of that? People see that I care as much as anyone else, that I'm going to work. I'm not going to ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself. So you start to adjust and you start to create, like, what are the values you want the company to live? You have to live them. I can't say we're the most transparent company and be secretive. I can't say that we're going to be a super candid company and be like foggy in my communications. And that's cool because that's not like journalism and it's not necessarily, you're not going to read it in a business book, but it's just an interesting dimension to humanity of how much the actions of yourself and others, how contagious it is and how quickly contagious it is. And for us, it's positive, but that's why I don't want to be around negative people or people who are self-focused, because that is like a cancer and it just spreads and oozes. And once it spreads, you can't get it out. And that is hard. It's the single hardest thing. One of the hardest things I have to do as a leader is to see that, oh man, so-and-so is so smart. They're so brilliant. They're not a good person. And I have to like suck it up and fire them. Like that is like literally the hardest, because you don't want to. You want to find, you want to squint. And, oh, I don't really see that, but like you see it. And by the way, if I don't act, everyone else sees that I don't act. Now I'm not living the values. So people know if you're doing the right thing.
And that's why many newsrooms is sort of facing their own sort of cultural reckoning right now. You know, also you talk a little bit about sort of your audience that you want to focus on. Like, how do you think about that initial sort of audience base? Like, what do you actually do to sort of acquire those audience? That you came in the product knowing that I'm going to focus on maybe a DC base, or you sort of, you know, because the professional is like a lot. Right. Yeah. And you know, your previous background with Politico is sort of a very different type of audience. Like, how do you went about sort of scaling Axios to a new type of audience?
Yeah. So what you do is what we did is we called it our radiate out strategy, which is think of like a bullseye and then these little circles around it. And we hired people like Sarah Fisher in media or Dan Primack in technology deals, or Ina Fried out in Silicon Valley and tech more broadly, who we knew were already read by the most powerful people in those sectors. And our theory was we knew we would get politics because of what we had done and kind of what we know. And so we said, listen, let's get people who are so wired that the most important people will have to read them, because then soon everyone around them will read them, then everyone around them will read them, and it echoes out. It's kind of the opposite approach of what other media companies take, which is like, let's go get as big an audience as possible. We were like, no, let's go get a pretty small audience and know it will become a much bigger audience. And that was maybe like a radical way of thinking about it, but we kind of knew that it would be successful if we did it that way. And that's worked. Now that's much bigger now, right? Now it's like, we're going to get into this, I'm sure, but like we've expanded into cities, but we're still targeting the same type of person, the smart, rising, established professional, basically what I would call information dependent people who really need information and news to navigate their community or their job or a sector or whatever it is. And that's a pretty big group of people. And it's an important group of people, and as a business proposition, it's a lucrative group of people.
So just transition into that in terms of finding the smaller group. According to the New York Times, you acquire Charlotte Agenda, which is a Knight-funded project for close to $5 million, right?
Yeah.
What were some of the indicators with Charlotte Agenda that led you to making this acquisition? So that's one, and then we could talk a little bit about your broader local strategy in a bit.
So this guy Ted Williams runs the Charlotte Agenda at the time. I'm about to board a plane, and he calls me up. This is a true story, and he says, "Listen, I run the Charlotte Agenda." I never heard of it, and he explained what it was. He's like, "I read what you want to do on local. I'm telling you, I've done it here, and we're doing $2+ million in revenue. We have a 30% margin. I totally agree with the way you've articulated the strategy to go city by city." He goes, "Buy my company, and I won't even jack you up. I'll sell it at a very reasonable price, but put me in charge and let me help you expand." Literally the next day I said, "Okay, we're going to go through due diligence. We want to look at your thing, but if what you're saying is true, like, we're in. Like, that's what we want to do." We looked at the Charlotte Agenda, and they really had delivered the goods. There was quality journalism. They had a real audience. They had a real business, and actually the business was performing better than we thought our individual products would perform in the cities that we were going to go into. So they kind of opened our mind that this could be even bigger than we thought. And so the only due diligence we really did, and this is different probably than most companies, we did due diligence on all 11 people working there. Like, we want to talk to every one of them to figure out if they're a cultural fit, because people is our asset, right? That's our big, we have technology, we have IP, stuff like that, but it's all about people. And it was like, you could just tell instantly, they just had the same kind of values and same esprit de corps that we would have here. And so it was a very easy deal to do, and probably the easiest acquisition we'll ever do, and smart. It's been already paid off.
So should people just start calling you up?
It's funny because I've had a couple people do it since. Listen, that's how these deals happen. Like, I've heard from a lot of people, and I like it. Like, I've heard from probably a half dozen people, and you probably know most of them, running different size local projects. And if we think that we can help them or that they can help us, like, we do it. Usually we end up just doing it ourselves because it's hard to find that cultural fit or the right price point that works for the seller and the buyer. But my feeling on this thing is I learn something every time I get on the phone. I learn something about how they think about the market. I try to be pretty transparent, and the stuff that we think, I'm happy to share with anybody. You might believe it, you might not believe it. Some of it's probably really good. Some of it might be useless. But those conversations I find to be very useful.
And so once you acquire, Charlotte Agenda, you're also launching in, Des Moines, Tampa Bay, Denver, Twin City, Northwest Arkansas. Sort of like, how do you go about picking these launch cities? Is it more sort of capital driven, or what are the indicator for you to say, here's the bets that I'm going to make, but I'm going to make them first in these cities?
Yeah, well, there's a couple. Like the initial one was we just wanted kind of diversity of region and size, right? So that's why you get Des Moines, which I think it's like the 106th biggest city or something like that. Then you have bigger ones like Denver, Minneapolis, Tampa, kind of in between. And so because we want to really test our theory. I really believe in the theory, and I believe in it more today than I did 6 months ago, and I believed in it strongly then. I really what our theory is that it's not that people don't want local news, and it's not that local news does not have a business model. It's that the two, just because of a bunch of trends, didn't match. They basically, because papers were so cost heavy, distribution was so expensive, local news started to get a bad rap. People put a little bit less investment in it. And what we saw was like, no, we've got like cities are where all the action's going to be. Look at where all the companies are moving. Look at Apple's announcement in Raleigh this week. Look at Tesla moving to Austin. Like, the cities are where the action's going to be. That is where you're going to see businesses move to. It's where you're seeing people move to in this sort of post-coronavirus remote world. And by the way, that's where the most interesting debates in new technologies and new regulations are going to take place. That's where 5G is going to be unleashed. That's where you're going to see driverless vehicles. That's where you're going to see drones and all these other technological opportunities and challenges that we face. And so we believe that if we can get into these cities in a cost-effective way and basically take out all of the cost other than the journalism and go into these cities and basically do morning newsletters to begin with, where you hire 2 or 3 of the best reporters in each of those cities to help the smart professional navigate business technology and the things to see and things to do, sprinkle in a little bit of politics. Our theory was, okay, we're going to start to build an audience, and from there, as we grow that audience, we'll grow the business. So you're not killing yourself with costs from the beginning. And the early signs are awesome. We just passed today. We have 100,000 subscribers in Charlotte. We have 70,000 in Denver. We just went live a month and a half ago with a 35% open rate. So the early signs are that we have what they love to call in business books like product market fit. I think we have product market fit. And so the minute that we see that, then we're going to go into more cities. And there's different ways that you test it. You look at size, definitely try to figure out, is there a market? Like the Northwest Arkansas is an interesting one, right? We had basically a group of businesses who would come to us and said, like, I bet you people here would advertise if you guys would come to this region, because this region is the 13th largest growing region, but nobody pays attention to it. And I'm sure they would love people to pay attention to this region. And then we can do advertising on other publications and you and wherever else, trying to draw more people to the region. I was like, that's a smart idea. Let's talk. Let's see if there's something we can do. We're going to do it. And so I think there'll be a bunch of different ways that we come to these, but like very, very bullish on it. My hope is we're in 100 cities at some point soon. And my hope is after that we're in 1,000 towns and cities.
And do you imagine, sort of, because your business is mostly advertising.
Yep.
And right now there's this whole sort of tension between advertising versus subscription, right? Especially in a lot of the traditional local outlet, their big bet is on local subscribers, right? And so you're basically still, one of the few that's holding on, like making the bet on advertising. Why do you think that's the bigger bet to win in local versus, the subscriber route?
There's more money. I don't understand what people are looking at. I do not see the advertising market being soft at all. I see the advertising market's growing. And that's all I can look at is I can look at our numbers and I can look at what's happening with our competitors. I don't think that there's a limit of dollars out there. Yeah, Facebook and Google gobble up a lot of it, but they leave a lot on the table. And by the way, they're not the safest, cleanest place to advertise. We are. And that's a compelling point that I think businesses are buying into. I'm not anti-subs. I'm not anti-consumer subs. And maybe at some point we'll do some version of it. But I see a very profitable future in keeping these things free and giving access to everybody to the products and being able to make money off the advertising side. If we can't, maybe we would adjust and do subscriptions, or maybe we do both at some point. But right now, our focus, our theory is that we can do this profitably like Charlotte has, where everybody has access to this information and it's not just the domain of the wealthy. That would be great. Like that, how awesome would that be, Paul, right? If we can help slowly rebuild some coverage of these cities and these towns, and we can do it profitably, and everyone has free access to this information, then everybody's a winner. So I think it's to me, it's of all the projects that we have going, it's the one I've got most of my heart and mind into. Like, I want to do this. I want part of my legacy to be that we helped solve at least a part of the local news crises. And there's a crisis out there. And I think, listen, this is small. We're starting only in a few places, but I really believe that our theory is as sound of a business theory as I've seen in the local space. And we'll test it out, and we'll work with partners, and we'll work with you guys, hopefully, on some projects along the way, where we can then bring even more investigative reporting and more reporting that makes a big difference in these communities.
So, you outlined one of your big aspirations is to be in 100 cities. Do you imagine yourself being the predominant local media source of that city, or do you envision this to Axios to always be sort of like that supplement to, it will only thrive when there's an anchoring institution, or do you ever see yourself replacing that?
I don't think that's how it works anymore, right? I think in Substack showing that, I just think in good and bad ways, we don't all turn to one source of information anymore. We have endless opportunities. And so I think there's always going to be countless players in every market. I don't know what is Minneapolis going to look like in 10 years. I have no idea. I assume the Star Tribune is still thriving. I assume we're thriving. I assume there's some individuals using their own platform who are thriving. There's probably going to be a business or tech publication we're not thinking of that's thriving. I don't think of it that way. And I don't use it to deflect, like, who are your competitors? I don't care about competition. I care about, like, are we providing something that the consumer is saying, I need to have that. If we do that, it doesn't matter what other people are doing. And our job, we're not in there. We're not like some equity fund coming in and trying to, like, buy out a newspaper and gut it for profit. Like, and we're not even trying to, I always say we come in peace. Like, if you have good pieces, we're going to highlight them in our newsletter. We're gonna celebrate local journalism, because we come in confidently and we come in humbly. Like, we want to create a great product that people are hopefully get habituated to. And if we can do that, then we'll be fine. And I believe we will fix all of these problems. I really do. I think when you put human creativity to things where there are needs, and I think people need really good information around their community, around their neighborhood, around all these topics that we've talked about. Like, they will figure out how to make money around it. And I think we've proven that a couple of times over, and hopefully we keep doing it.
And, Charlotte Agenda is not your first acquisition. You actually also acquired Sports Internet, a sports newsletter company, in early 2019. And right now you're constantly being courted, or you're thinking about how do you think about growth via M&A?
To be, like, clear or fair, like, Sports Internet was Kendall. It's another great story. This is like a great lesson for people who are thinking about pitching a company. Kendall Baker runs this thing called Sports Internet. It's a really good daily newsletter. Basically, if you are someone like me who cares about sports but has suddenly become too busy with kids and dogs and life, that you can't be as obsessive as you were before. So it really summarizes, like, what's going on in sports that you should care about. He calls up and says, hey, like, I love being a reporter. I love what Axios is doing. And he sends me a picture on a napkin. I am creating the Axios of sports. And he said, will you look at my product? And I said, yes, I'll look at it. And it was good. And I said, it's good, but here's kind of what I'd want to see if we were ever to do something with you. And he's like a golden lab. Like, he's just a puppy. He just wanted to, like, I want to do that. I want to do that. And he kept improving it. And we're like, this is awesome. Why don't we just acquire you? You come over here, create Axios Sports. We'll get you a bigger audience. We'll give you a bigger support system. And he did it. And now he's got, I think, 500,000 readers. I don't know what the latest numbers are. And it's great. And if you don't get it and you're interested in sports, it's Axios Sports. It's awesome.
And so in terms of your other future M&A, do you have any, what's going on with the conversation with Athletic?
Yeah, I mean, it was reported in the journal that they had approached us about a potential merger. Well, I love the Athletic. I don't, to be honest, like, it was an interesting point in media where almost every company in the digital era is talking to somebody about buying or selling or merging. And so I probably talked to 10 companies in the last couple of months. Like, would you, and to us, we're always going to be a buyer. Like, we're like a buyer or a runner. Like one of our things we'll tell anyone is, like, we love this space and we think we know how to run a company. And so, like, we want to have conversations where we can help other people maybe grow their businesses. I don't know if we'll do anything. Like, in the end, like, you end up, it's often easier just to go grow it yourself and sort of stick to your culture and grow things organically. But when the right things come up, it all then goes down to the cost, right? Is this going to bring in more value or bring us into a space that we couldn't get into on our own quicker at a reasonable price? And that's always the rub. The bigger it gets, remember, the two things we've done was Kendall, a one-person company, Charlotte, a 10 or 11-person company. They've been small. We've not done anything big. And so that doesn't mean we wouldn't do anything big. We have pretty big ambitions, but it really would have to be, the test would be, you have to do high quality content. You have to really buy into like this, like, we're not a traffic play. We're not going to do stupid tricks to game the system to get a bigger audience. Like, we're all about high quality content. We're all about, like, transparency. Or, we have this pact with the audience. And if you can buy into that and you agree with it, then we can definitely do business together. And by the way, most of these serious premium journalism or media companies do buy into that. They share the same principles.
Yeah, it's a couple of questions coming from the audience. Actually, two questions around sort of the rural area publishers, right? They pretty much ignore where do you see, and the question is like, how small of a market is too small for Axios?
I mean, it's a question that we debate all the time. And so the way that I think about it is, could we get to a point, like we're building tools. We have this company called HQ, which basically helps companies or cities or communities or leaders communicate the way we communicate with smart brevity. And it helps, has a little bit of machine learning and a lot of tricks and tools to be able to communicate with brevity. One of the things we think a lot about is, okay, if we had that tool and it was so easy that I'm Sally Smith and I'm in Lincoln, Maine, and I just jump on my computer and I get vetted by Axios, could I start Axios Lincoln, Maine? And is there a way to do that either as an employee or as somebody on the outside? Do we share in the revenue? Like, how do we structure that? We're probably years away from doing it, but we think about that question a lot. Like, my dream would be that we figure out a system that unleashes that we can figure. The important part is, like, you can't, the thing that would probably make us less attractive to like the Googles or Facebooks of the world is, we don't believe in just unlimited access to everything and that the creator can just create and whatever happens, happens. We believe very passionately that you've got to be vetted. You have to really be like someone who cares about truth and cares about news. And you probably need to be edited, right? Like, you've got to, like, that trust that you have with the reader or the listener or the viewer is so precious and so core to what we do. So I would love to crack that code. If you have ideas, like, I'd love to hear ideas, because I think, like, to be honest, like, the cities are where the trouble is. The trouble is going to be, there's the news deserts, there's rural areas, there's tons of places that have no coverage, no news, like, ripe for mischief, ripe for bad things to happen, and they deserve good content too. So I don't know what the answer is. Being honest, it's something we're going to probably wrestle with for the next year or two, but it's something that's on my mind, and I hope we're the ones who can help solve it.
And there's also questions, or actually a thread in the comments really about legacy outlet not able to innovate, and people want to start something new, but they don't know which direction. What will be your advice for, what is it that nonprofit newsroom or legacy newsroom could learn from your journey in scaling Axios? Because the way you sort of frame it is, look, you're bullish on advertising, you're still bullish on local, and you're willing to make that bet because you have a very defined audience and very defined product. But many nonprofits and legacy are struggling with that. Like, what is it they could adopt? If there's like a Jim VandeHei-ism, like what is it that they should subscribe to?
I mean, one, let go of the past and let go of your habits and deal with the world as it is and it's about to be, right? So, like, there's so much of what I think holds back companies that get held back is just doing things because that's the way they always did it, or doing things because they can still squeeze a little bit of revenue out of it. Like, you have to look at the world as it is, and the world as it is kind of awesome in the news space if you can kind of start fresh, or if you can mentally start fresh. Distribution, almost free. The underlying technology, off the shelf, WordPress, almost free, can be free, very cheap, exponentially cheaper than it was 5 years ago. And so the thing that was the most expensive thing for a newspaper, these big buildings, why do you need a building? Why do you need a printing press? Why do you need a piece of paper? Why do you need the paper boy or girl? You don't need any of it. I can send it to you for free. So you got to look at the world as it is. People are going to consume content digitally, obviously. They're almost all going to consume it on a phone. So it's going to be mobile, and they're going to be busy. And if you can build it around knowing where people are and where they're going, I think you can be successful. And I agree with the question to a point. I think that a lot of, especially city and state-based media companies, have been very slow to adapt. And by the way, they'll die if they don't adapt quickly. I do think some of the bigger companies, I think the New York Times is exceptionally innovative, and I say this not ruefully, like, they're like the quickest to copy anything. that they see is working. They basically hired the entire political staff of Politico when we were there because they saw that we were better than they were at covering politics. And I see that they're adapting much more to newsletters and to brevity, even on their mobile site. Like I think they're building their company around creators, probably paying people more.
So there's no shame in copying. I want to do one more question from the audience before a lightning round. Yep. What is Axios looking for in a pitch, and who's pitching to you?
In a story pitch?
No, in terms of a investment pitch.
In terms of somebody who wants to invest money or wants us to buy them?
Want you to buy them.
And the question is, what would I look for?
Yeah.
How would you do that? Listen, we'd be looking for somebody who cares about premium content in a space that we care about, so national or local or certainly B2B, and that they have sort of thought about our manifesto and thought about our Bill of Rights for the audience, and that they buy into it. If those two things are true, there's probably a really good conversation to be had. We're flexible around that, but it's like if you just read the manifesto, which is on our website, if you just read the Bill of Rights that we have with our audience, it'll tell you everything you need to know about our company and about us, and what would work and not work for us.
Okay, before we end, just quick lightning round of thoughts on a couple of hot sort of trends and topics. Substack.
Mixed feelings. I think I don't understand the valuation that they just got, because when I look around, I don't see thousands and thousands of people who are such good journalists that they could command a big enough audience to command a big enough subscription base. That said, they seem to be doing really well. They're attracting a lot more talent, even from established places. They've got a tremendous brand halo. And I do think they are unleashing the capabilities for people to do journalism in different places. So I'm a fan. Like I subscribe to some of their writers, but I would and I hope that their business model is a successful one. But I don't ever look at these like some people get, I don't like them, or they let too many people on the platform, or I don't like this writer or that writer. Like I don't ever get that spooled up about it. I like the fact that they have a nice technology that allows reporters to report, or opinion writers to opine, as long as it's clear what they're up to. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out long term.
NFT, blockchain.
I don't know if I know enough about it to like say anything super smart. Like obviously I pay attention to it, like the whole blockchain, NFT, crypto area. A lot of it I still have a hard time getting my mind around, but obviously it's like white hot in the markets, and white hot especially with the I think younger consumers. So my assumption is I would like crypto, for instance. I've always been sort of deeply skeptical because it's not backed by the full might and faith of the United States government or some government, but it seems to be taking on a life of its own. And even skeptics like the big banks are now embracing it. So something that might have been based on a hope and dream might become a reality because so many people rallied around it, and they'll figure out the infrastructure and the backing of it. And how do you deal with a digital currency that's not backed by a government?
So no Axios tokens in the immediate future.
I don't think so. I don't think that's in our future.
Artificial intelligence.
More important maybe than the internet. Probably a bigger cultural effect potentially than the internet. And you think about the internet, it's by far and away the biggest, most profound change maybe in the history of humanity, but certainly in our history. I just think like AI, like this capacity for machines to do things better than humans, is only going to get bigger and better, and you're going to apply it to almost every aspect of life, and it's going to displace humans in a lot of spaces, including a lot of spaces you don't think they could replace. I think machines we now have seen the power of them, and I think it's going to be like the internet in that we're going to wake up one day and we're going to realize we allowed these technologies to spread and manifest for a decade before we put any regulation around it. And I think it's why people like Elon Musk quite sincerely say it's like a threat to humanity, like not controlled. It is legitimately a threat to humanity. The other side of it is it can cure cancer. It could dramatically expand our life span. It could make big ads, could solve some of the most the toughest diseases, the toughest handicaps that people have to deal with. So it's like it's like the internet in that it depends. Like there's so much good that flows from a Facebook or a Google, and then you can have like massive fraud or massive mind manipulation at scale because of some of these technologies. And there's something government's not. One, the government doesn't attract the best and brightest, especially in the elected side of the House of Representatives. And you don't have an institution that's built for speed of change that we're confronting. Like everything is going to change even quicker than before, right? Nobody thinks it's going to slow. And these new technologies and these new challenges pop up. Well, we're just now getting around to regulating Facebook and Google. And if we do regulate them at all, 15 years later. Well, you can't do that. To be able to avert some of the problems that you have, you had to do it 10 years ago. And I could find yourself in the same hole with AI. And also on AI, and you wanted me to do these quick fire. I'm doing long ones instead, not smart brevity. The other thing I worry about is that it gives China a distinct advantage over the United States because they have more people and looser regulations around what they do with data. And the more data you put into the machine, in theory, the better and more precise the machine becomes. And so I worry that it could give China an advantage over us just because of size and also what they're willing to do with people's privacy and data that we're not willing to do and shouldn't be willing to do. And so I wish people paid more attention to it.
Is Axios using AI in the business, in your business?
A little. The place where we probably use it the most is in this communication software that we're building, which we're basically trying to take what we've learned in the newsroom to use some machine learning and AI to help people clarify their own writing, right? Like be able to spot when you have three ideas, that should be bullets. It shouldn't be three sentences squished together. Change weak words to better words. Change terrible headlines to better headlines. And so that could be great. Like that's a good example. You can take really smart people with machine learning to maybe help you communicate better. That's awesome, right? Like that is great. That's different than creating robots that could kill at scale, right? From afar. Like there are two ends of the spectrum. And I'm not worried about ours. I am worried about the killer robots.
So unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I do want to sort of get some final thoughts from you. What is the thing you would double down on in local news if you could double down on? And what is it that you wish local news would stop doing?
I mean, the thing I would double down on is the thing we probably will double down on, which is I would get into more cities faster. I think that especially with these the top 50 cities where you're seeing population growth because of migration of people, I'd want to get there quickly. I don't know that I don't have get rid of the newspaper. I don't know. Like it doesn't, like people don't need it. It's too expensive to produce and people can get things digitally. If I go home, my parents are in their late 70s. They're on their iPad more than I'm on my phone, so they can look at it digitally. So I just think that the newspapers hold people back. But in terms of content and coverage, I think like people take it seriously and they try to do good coverage. I don't think the problem with media wasn't like crappy reporters or bad coverage decisions. I think it was a business model that was so fat and happy for so long that people got addicted to, and they were very, 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 very slow to adapt to the change.
Well, with that, Jim, I want to thank you for sharing your insights, and we look forward to having you back here again soon.
I always love your interviews. All right. Thanks, bud. Appreciate it.
Bye.